Yeah. Hi, everybody. Come on in and sit down. We've got a nice next session, but please come on and find your seats. If we can pull up Andrew, that YouTube slide again, we have the link live, and so we know we got a bunch of Twitter monsters. Where is it? Oh, well, there it is. Fantastic. So for all of you people who are out there who have massive followings of one person or a million people, please let them know that you're here and let them know that they can watch along with us. We are in a remarkable time, and I was talking about this earlier, the idea that the internet is transforming everything. And one of the things that we've watched it transform for the last decade and a half, of course, is the music industry. Most of the time, the story that we hear is the story of the RIAA, which is that the internet has been bad for music. But I think that that's not the story that I want to hear today, and not the story I want you to take away, because the internet is very good for music. Icy Hawks in LA, the gentlemen who are standing to my left, are composed, there's three gentlemen, and they get to continue being musicians because of the internet, because of a remarkable online community that supports them. Their first album, which is what was the title? But it's in continuous rotation in my house.
The eponymous first album came out on September 11th, 2001.
And when is the next album? What, you guys are recording it now?
Recording it now. It'll be out towards the end of the summer.
And tell us about the next, if you like what you're hearing here, not only are they going to sell albums, but your next gig is, you're opening for Billy Ray Cyrus when?
May 21st in New Mexico.
And for which event?
Steak Fest, if you like steak. Got some steak lovers out here.
So from ad tech to Steak Fest. I think this is some of the stuff that we're doing in this environment that, again, is changing the world. I want you please to give a big welcome to Icy Hawks in LA. We have Rob Waller, Paul. Rob is a professor by day, a musician by night. Let's give him a big round of applause. Take it away, guys.
1, 2, 3.
She was born in a school bus on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Her parents had driven from the San Francisco Bay. It was late December of 1968, and the skies were filling with the darkness of hate. Bobby and Martin were long gone. The flower children were singing their very last song. Nixon was heading to that big White House, and the bombs would soon be dropping on children of light. But a beautiful little girl was born on Christmas Day, away from the madness that had driven them astray. She carried a sparkle right there in her eyes, and it shined through the night, and it filled up the sky. She was raised by hippies in the hills of Tennessee, raised by hippies so wild and so free, raised by hippies that filled her up with love. Look into the skies and the heavens up above. The family moved to Chicago in 1982. Reagan was president, they didn't know what to do. Eyes, odds, and argowns made her feel strange. She missed the hippie children with earthy nature names. The Walt boys fell in love with her on the first day of spring. She went to class with no shoes on her feet. The teachers tried to break her over hillside hippie ways, made her sit inside on the sunniest of days. She was raised by hippies in the hills of Tennessee, raised by hippies so wild and so free, raised by hippies. They did some things wrong, but they raised their children right. sang on the summer of love, 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 summer of love. Well, she's all grown up now with kids of her own. She teaches them the songs of her hillside hippie home. Run, old Molly, run, run, old Molly, run. And that old school bus is battered, but her engine's good and strong. Tomorrow's morning sun will find them further along. And that songbook is dusty, but they remember the tune. Her uncle's in the back, reading the Chronicles of Doom. She was raised by hippies in the hills of Tennessee. Raised by hippies, so wild and so free. Raised by hippies, they filled her up with love. Raised by hippies from the skies up above. She was raised by hippies in the hills of Tennessee. Raised by hippies, so wild and so free. Raised by hippies, they did some things wrong, but they raised their children right, and they did it for a song. Run, old Molly, run, run, old Molly, run. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Well, we're glad to be here as part of the Ad Tech festivities today. We started our band back in 1999, right around the time Napster was really peaking, just getting its start. And when we were starting out, the thing that you did was you signed with a record label. They took care of all the stuff. You were the musician. You were the artist. That was great. Well, after about the third time that we had a record label sign us, we put out a record, and then they immediately folded. We thought, well, we got to kind of figure this out on our own a little bit more. But we've had a wonderful online community that's kept us going and has put together shows for us from Australia to London. So it's an amazing thing, and we're all in the midst of that transformation together. So we'll give you a little bit of a sample of what we do. This is a song called Highway Down. Highway, how much I need you. Highway, wind across the lane. Take me away from all my troubles. Give me my 2 feet on the ground. Big sandy mountains that welcome me. Sweet desolation, Highway 93. Lay my bag out on the Carson sink. Can't be 1,000 miles from anything. Oh, won't you take me down easy? Bring me all the way down. Oh, won't you take me down easy? Bring me all the way down. Oh, won't you take me down easy? Bring me all the way down. could get addicted to the highway down. I get all up into my head too much, stressed out about things that were said and such. I should be lying in my bed till dusk, a bed of flowers overlooking the San Joaquin. Oh, won't you take me down easy, bring me all the way down. Oh, won't you take me down easy, bring me all the way down. Oh, won't you take me down easy, bring me all the way down. I'm gonna heal my afflictions on the highway down. Lord knows I love this valley, though it's as wounded as an alley. I see the weddings and the rodeos and the worn out fields on my bed of flowers overlooking the San Joaquin. Oh, won't you take me down easy, bring me all the way down. Oh, won't you take me down easy, bring me all the way down. Oh, won't you take me down easy, bring me all the way down. Talking to my devil on the highway down, getting on the level on the highway down. I dig my grave with a shovel on the highway down. Thank you. We got one more song for you. You know, we think about how much we like having loyal fans. You know, we like fans who are loyal to us. We also had to think about being loyal to them and try to think about ways we could be loyal to our fans. And our fans really like certain plants grown up in Humboldt County, California. So we've got a little song for them. This is a song called Humboldt. If I beat the DA, just 10 lonely hours to my friends in LA. Next stop is a jumbo jet, fly me to the fields at Tibet. Baba boys, I'm out of here. Tibet is my new frontier. I quit my job at the 7-Eleven. Now I'm heading off to a stony heaven. Oh, when I cross that line, I'll be feeling fine and humble. Oh, cool my mind, won't do no time and humble. Well, the bonfires burn and the children learn and humble. Ooh, humble. Hope I die in 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 humble. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. Have a great rest of your week. See you later. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, guys. Icy Hawks in LA. Check them out online. Download their album, buy their album, and let's keep them and acts like them going. The Twitter stream is going full force. I wrote this one down because I thought this one was really funny. We pay attention to this stuff, and it was, is Eric One Music? Can you stand up? Is Eric One Music we're handling in the, maybe he's online, but it was, will they serve Texas barbecue after this country band performs? Tragically, no, but a great note for next time. Whoa, now that's really funny. I want to talk about our next speaker by talking about my son, William. William is 5. He'll be 6 in June. And William loves superheroes. And we watch cartoons like Batman, Brave and the Bold together. And he turned to me once after we watched one of these superhero cartoons. He said, Dad, are there real heroes out there? Are there heroes in life? And that is when I told my son about my friend Tom. Tom Deierlein is a hero. And the best way that I can explain why he's a hero and why I've invited him to speak at AdTech Inspire is by asking you guys to look at this short video. So can we roll the video?
Making a Difference. Brought to you by GlaxoSmithKline. Today's medicines, tomorrow's miracles.
Finally tonight, our series Making a Difference and some unusual dispatches from Iraq. Soldiers' letters from the battlefield have long touched the nation for their poignancy and honesty. But the emails from the soldier you're about to meet started a movement that brought smiles to one of Baghdad's toughest neighborhoods. And that's not an easy thing to do. Here's NBC's Lee Cowan.
Dateline Sadr City, 2005, the center of squalor outside Baghdad. Tom Deierlein had just arrived, called up by the Army from his New York advertising job to help make hell a little more livable.
Envision the most destitute and poorest and dirtiest of slums that you've either ever seen on TV, or imagined.
He had a flair for writing, and soon his emails home developed a theme.
I really don't need anything personally right now, but if you want to, please think of inner city children and what they need. I'm driving down these streets every day anyway. What is it going to hurt to stop for 10 minutes and hand out some shoes or some candy or some clothes?
His advertising friends were well connected, and soon all those things, plus school supplies, even vitamins, were making Baghdad by the box load. And because it was all his, there was no red tape, No complicated chain of command to get it distributed. Tom just did it until a sniper ended it all.
I was shot literally within a minute of that photo. God, that's me right there, dude. I cannot believe I'm going to die right here in this street. That's all I was thinking.
His pelvis was shattered. He had to learn to walk again and endures painful physical therapy every single day. But through it all, even from his hospital bed.
And my company continues to do the best they can at helping the people in East Baghdad.
Solder City's kids never left his mind, and the donations never stopped coming. So while he was recovering, those advertising buddies started a foundation in Tom's name. It never skipped a beat. By the time Tom got back to work, the foundation had raised more than $120,000.
Even if you just affect 10 families, 100 families, or 100 children, I think it's doing something good. And not for nothing, it helps the impression of Americans over there.
Number one. His Solder City ambassadors now are other soldiers.
You play football today?
Doling out solace and soccer balls, pencils and paper. Tom may never return to Solder City, but he's changed it a little. All from the bottom up. Lee Cowan, NBC News, New York.
So many of the people in this room know me as a cigar-smoking, martini-swilling guy telling jokes well past midnight at conferences like this. But this is more of a story about a transition that I made and a transformation that I made to become a special operations soldier patrolling the streets of Baghdad. And as you saw in the video, it was a slum that was filled with the worst possible conditions that were possible. But by 2006, the military had moved on. Humanitarian aid is a key part of what they did. But as you recall, we had the elections in early 2006, so now it was about governance and economic development. But in the area that I was in, it was still very much people living under the worst possible conditions. And kids are kids no matter where you go, right? They want to play, they want to laugh, they want to have fun with their friends. And anytime we got anywhere near them with a Humvee or we'd get out and go to talk, they'd have their hands up, soccer ball, and even if that was the only English they knew how to say it pretty clearly. And we would throw them beanie babies and soccer balls, and periodically we would give them things. And the parents aren't any different either. No matter where you go, parents just want to put some food on the table, put a roof over their head, and give the kids a decent life, one slightly better than the one that they've had. So what I decided to do is when any time I went out on a mission, I would try and do a side mission while we were already out there. So this is an interesting photo because if you notice behind these kids that are getting some food and water is a brand new fire truck. So we had gone out to inspect this fire station, right? I was civil affairs. I was involved in this reconstruction and this development activity. And when we were out inspecting this brand new fire station, across the street, kids were swimming in a cesspool. Not something like a cesspool. They were swimming in a cesspool, and they were living in houses that didn't have roofs and corrugated tin. They were in rag clothes, and you see these kids are still in pajamas and no shoes. So we decided to go out there during our next inspection, and we were going to bring them some humanitarian aid. And that's really the beginning of how this all started. If you recognize those shoes, those are from Kate Everett Thorpe. I don't know if she's here at the conference this week, but those are her kids' shoes. It didn't take much for her to go into her garage or go to a closet and just throw them in a box and ship them over. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room that have played a big role back in that summer of 2006 to get this foundation started by donating things that you no longer needed. This is an interesting little bit. Can anyone recognize what's in that girl's hand? I heard it. Slim Jim. Had a teenager in New Jersey box up some Skittles. I admit I ate one bag. Peanuts and a whole stack of these Slim Jims. And I hand them out as part of this giving out supplies to these kids. And my buddy pulls me aside and he says, "Is there any pork in those?" I said, "Oh, man. This is an international incident waiting to happen." So I ran to this little girl and I yanked it out of her hand. Chicken and beef. So we were safe, but it was a tense moment. Mothers are the same throughout the world. Mothers are the same. I'd give out tons of water, kids come running. Soccer balls, kids come running. Clothes, food, fathers, brothers, kids. Then you break out vitamins. And from nowhere, within 60 seconds, you'd see a queue of women, 30 feet, 40 deep, full burqa. And as you can imagine, this is culturally sensitive. They're not supposed to talk to strangers, engage with strangers. But there was something powerful in making sure that their children could not be malnutrition, to get this vitamin. So my interpreter would explain to them, it tastes like candy, hide it from the kids, give them one a week, not one a day, to make them last. And it was really, really something that it spoke to the mothers more than anything else, and it allowed them to be willing to risk that cultural break. Flintstones, I think, are like $12 a bottle, so I started giving them some from Walmart. Then I was shot by a sniper, as you heard in the video. So I was about halfway through my tour, I got shot. But that's an interesting point, because that's when the TD Foundation was actually started. Sean Finnegan got together with Paul Bremer, and they decided that they were going to keep this going. We were due to have a fundraiser anyway. I got shot in September. In October, we were going to do a big fundraiser. Bill Flatley stepped up and said, I can get it done at the Forbes Gallery. And that was really the birth of this organization. I'm not that narcissistic. I didn't come up with the name. But this is what we do. We now continue to give food and vitamins and clothes and blankets. But we also do a ton of medical work. In fact, to date, we've actually provided life-saving surgery to over 30 children from Iraq and Afghanistan. This is in the fall of 2007. I had just now come back to New York, and this is one of the first children that we worked with. Her name is Sarah. She was born with a heart defect. We were able to pay for the flight for her mother and her aunt to come and get treated in Montefiore, and these pictures are taken at a Ronald McDonald House in Long Island. I was at an iMedia Summit, and I wasn't making this up, I'm in the Beverly Hills Hotel. Fancy schmancy, I'm at an iMedia event, and my phone rings. I said, hello? It says, I'm trying to reach the Tom Deierlein Foundation. I said, well, you've got him. So, well, I need to apply for a grant. Well, what's the process? I said, well, tell me what's wrong. And she had 2 blue babies. Her name was Brenda. She had 2 blue babies. She had arranged to get their surgery completed. She had everything lined up, but she needed $8,000 per child. She needed $16,000 to save these lives. She goes on and says, if we don't get them surgery within 2 weeks, both these babies are going to die. And I said, okay, well, just tell me where to send the check. She said, excuse me? I said, just send me an email and give me the mailing address, and I'll send the money. $16,000, right? She started to cry because she had gotten done with all these things. She was at her wit's end. She had everything lined up. She couldn't save the lives of these 2 kids. She had $16,000. And that's kind of what this foundation is about. We say yes, whether people say no. I have people reach out to me from Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're wondering whether there's a paperwork or a process. I say, how many kids you got? And then within a week, we have them school supplies or clothes or toys or whatever it is that they're requesting. We've sent generators. We've sent laptops. We do a lot of burn cases. Obviously, you're familiar with the fact that they don't have a lot of electricity or intermittent power supplies, so there's a lot of oil lamps. So we do a lot of burn cases in conjunction with Boston Shriners. This girl, we were able to get her treated. This is now a 3-year-old photo, and she has burns over 70% of her body. A lot of the work that we do is with military personnel, or in this case, State Department personnel. This was an orphanage based in Afghanistan. I connected up with them through a West Point classmate of mine. They found out about this orphanage that's located near a prison in Afghanistan, and so we shipped them some school supplies. Once again, these kids don't have anything. And think about how many times we're trying to get our kids to go to school or do their homework. These kids want to learn. And then culturally, their parents want them to have everything that they want to learn. Look at these kids. They're tickled pink over school supplies. One of the other things that we do a lot of work with is a group called Gift of Life in conjunction with Riley's Children's Hospital. This will be their 6th mission. The 7th starts this Friday. In fact, as I'm standing on this stage, a team of surgeons and nurses and medical technicians are in Amman right now preparing for surgeries for kids from all over the Middle East. We just sponsor the ones from Iraq. And once again, I think I mentioned Deierlein Children's Hospital. Recognize anyone? There's Sarah. But now she's 5, so now she's doing her follow-up surgery to continue to monitor and correct the birth defect. And she was the queen of the hospital and mothering all the other children. Once again, we're going to have 7 children within the next 10 days that are going to get life-saving surgery in Amman. But we don't do this alone, right? I'm standing up on stage and I get to be the friendly face of the TD Foundation, but we do a lot of work with the Sierra Medical Society out in LA. The Iraqi Children's Project, a guy like me, he was deployed, he was a surgeon. At a certain point, he could not provide medical care for these folks. He wasn't allowed to based on military regulations. So he decided to start the Iraqi Children's Project. Children in Need International, that's something that Brenda, the woman I talked to you about on the phone, is there. Riley Hospital, Shriners. 2 Eagle Scouts, as their Eagle project, put together 500 school packs and shipped them off to Iraq and Afghanistan. So it wasn't just about their local community, it was about the international community. In the center is a woman, Mary Kay Satriano, and she is a saint. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman, and tied into more than 2/3 of the logos that you see on that slide. She has a regular job, she's a student, she's deployed active duty right now, and she's involved in all of these charities, and she's the key to this network that has come together. And she doesn't ask for anything. She gives everything to help kids all over the world. I promised today to talk a little about our industry and how different people have stepped up. Now, certainly I have some company logos on here, but it was Mark Silva, not real branding, right? It was Sean Hecking that insisted Reuters sponsor our second cocktail party. Kirk McDonald, 2 years in a row at Time Inc. Digital sponsored our holiday fundraiser. I don't want to embarrass Doug. He's here in the audience. He was a founding board member. And every time there was a sellers forum, TD Foundation got a huge check. Brian Quinn at Wall Street Journal, they had worked out a barter agreement with the TPC golf courses, and he donated that golf course so that we raised $10,000 for the foundation. Brad, who introduced me, it was his idea to run a branding campaign along with 24/7 and Collective, gave up tens of millions of impressions. Basement Inc., Doug Schumacher, they're the ones that did the TD Foundation logo. It's about companies that have a ton of resources, but it's also about people. It's about the individual, and that's really what every one of these folks stepped up without being asked. They had access to resources, and they provided them to make a difference. Tom Lynch. I don't know how many folks know Tom Lynch. He was the director of digital for ING for many, many years, and a few years back, he took his daughter on a vacation to South Africa, and they decided to go to a small village. And when they were at this village, his 13-year-old daughter made a connection and realized that there was this malnutrition, chronic malnutrition, generation after generation. And she set it upon herself to get them supplies and training and set them up so that they could actually begin to sustainably feed themselves with vegetables. A 13-year-old girl started a 501c3 nonprofit. She's raised over $45,000. She's got gardens in 40 families' houses, in 9 schools. So within 3 years, a 13, now 16-year-old girl is feeding generations of families in a self-sustaining way. When she goes to college, she's going to expand to surrounding villages. So my point is, if a 13-year-old girl can feed a village and make it sustainable with training and supplies, and now is changing generations of families, imagine what you could do with the resources you have. The importance of a team. No one does this alone. Everything that I do is always 2 or 3 more people or another organization or someone that steps up at the last minute. Do something. I don't care what your zip code. Within 5 miles of your house, there is somebody that needs your help. There's even an organization called Do Something. You text them your zip code, and periodically they will text you with opportunities for charity. Do something. You don't have to be like me and get shot to wake up and decide that you're going to make a difference. I don't recommend that. But, you know, TD Foundation is for me because I was living with those kids. So do something. For me, if you want to get involved with the TD Foundation, you can donate cash, goods, clean up your garage, box it up, and ship it. We have a Facebook site. Schools, I go to local schools, I will talk to the kids, start a drive, and then we'll send them back photos of where their goods ended up. Or if you know someone deployed, we're always looking for people that are in the box that we can ship stuff to that they can get into the hands of the needy children. And that's for more information, including a link to this video. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tom. We now move to the last speaker this hour, and this is, we're going to bring him out in just a second. Inspiration comes sometimes from unusual places, and that is what we're about to move to. Grant McCracken, the anthropologist, author of Chief Culture Officer, and a myriad other books, is a friend of mine, and he has a blog, Culture By, and I follow it avidly. And Grant was at a party, and he heard the gentleman who's about to join us on stage talking vehemently about different sources of, and unlikely sources of inspiration. So I read this post on Grant's blog, and I called Grant. I said, who is this guy? And he described Michael Knolla. And I said, well, can you introduce me to him? Because this is fascinating stuff. And he said, okay. And one thing led to another. Michael and I got on a phone. I was fascinated by what he was saying. And I said, would you like to come and do this as a talk? And we had to wrest extraordinary permissions in order to get him to come. We managed to do it. Please give him your full attention, and let's give a warm welcome to Michael Knolla.
The immortal words of John Cleese. And now for something completely different. When I was an adolescent, I was absolutely convinced that I was going to pay for college by selling my comic book collection. This would be my first experience with an investment bubble, and like all investment bubbles, it didn't exactly end well. As an adolescent, I didn't realize that owning both Amazing Spider-Man and Uncanny X-Men did not represent adequate portfolio diversification. Suffice to say, when it came time to pay for college, I turned to student loans, not to my comic book collection, which was now boxed and gathering dust in my closet. I recently celebrated my 10-year anniversary at the company where I work, and as is the case, I think, with all anniversaries, it catalyzed a certain amount of reflection. And it occurred to me that perhaps my previous prediction had been more prescient than previously presumed. And this is because I've gone on to pay off those student loans with the money I earned as an equity analyst. And equity analysis was not exactly the most obvious career path for me, given where I grew up. Because the only stock I grew up around was the livestock at the farm up the street. Now, the simple thing is, if I'd had to start without that, I would have been in trouble. But a lot of the skills I use in my day-to-day life as an equity analyst actually have their origins in those early days of reading comic books. The term acceptation is from evolutionary biology. It refers to something that evolved for one use that is later adapted to another. The simplest example I can use of the acceptation of comic books to capital markets in my own life is reading. Comic books were my gateway drug to a lifetime of literature. They led me to Kurt Vonnegut and Douglas Adams, to Umberto Eco and Jorge Luis Borges, to history and philosophy. And given that 60% of what I do on a daily basis as an equity analyst is read, the ability to read faster and longer that has developed over this lifetime of reading provides a critical advantage. But of course, the absolute amount of information I can process is not enough. Due to probably a lot of people in this room, the information I now have available to me as an equity analyst has grown exponentially. No matter how much I read, I cannot read it all. I can't get through it all. And that would be okay if the improvement in quality of the information available to me had increased at the same rate as the quantity of information, but it hasn't. And so the most important skills I have in my job are the ability to separate signal from noise. And this is where comic books come into play, as they help provide me with a skill set and framework for information management. Now, if you went down to your local comic book shop and you pulled a random issue off the rack, you probably would not understand what I'm talking about. Because, I mean, really, what is a comic book, a single issue? It's 20 some odd pages, maybe 6 panels per page. Not really much writing if you can see what's in there. So seriously, in the 10 to 15 minutes that I'm going to spend reading this, what skill could I honestly expect to develop? Well, the thing is, while the individual issue is modest, the comic collective is epic. The amount of retention and comprehension required to read a comic book in aggregate is significant. This omnibus here contains the first 25 issues of Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America. Now, if you read it in the original serialized form, that would have taken you about 1,300 pages, and it would have represented over 2 years' worth of reading. So in serialized form, you have to be able to recall things you read months, if not years ago. And beyond that, to truly comprehend what's going on in this issue, you have to know even more. Know things along at least 2 lines. The first of these is the simple fact that Captain America literally has decades worth of history that Ed Brubaker is working with and evolving and using. Second, Captain America is not a standalone character. He exists within a greater universe in the Marvel universe of characters. And what happens to him influences the other characters. What happens to the other characters influences those characters. So to truly understand what's going on here, you have to not just read that 20 pages, that single issue. You have to really commit to managing a couple years' worth of information management. An example, even the second thing, even beyond, within this edition here, is a major crossover event that involved probably half of the characters in the Marvel Universe. It's called Civil War. So if you really want to understand what's going on just in that discrete volume, you probably also have to pick up Mark Millar's Civil War and a lot of the separate tie-ins. The corollaries in the information flow between a comic book and publicly traded investment companies is in that reciprocity and in that discrete flow of information. The discrete packet of information that is the individual issue becomes the monthly sales report or the quarterly earnings report. And again, you have to be able to understand what has happened before to separate the signal from the noise within the sales report or the quarterly earnings report or whatever press release the company is putting out. Further, you have to be able to understand how that company fits in its broader industry, how it interacts with its suppliers and its customers, all these different back and forths. And it was that experience in dealing with shared universes, with a continuum. And that's what it is. Both comic books and businesses operate in a shared continuum as ongoing enterprises. And if you want to analyze them, you have to be able to manage that data flow, to comprehend the different relationships between them. In the investment world, we call this process the mosaic theory. It refers to taking all these discrete pieces of information and putting them together into a new picture to try to get a view of what's going on holistically. And again, this childhood spent taking what was going on with Captain America, what was going on with Spider-Man, what was going on with the X-Men and the Avengers, and trying to get the mosaic of the Marvel Universe was very good preparation for later going on and saying, okay, this is what's happening with this company, this is what's happening with its customers and its suppliers and its competitors, and making this holistic picture in order to get the impression of it. And the reason you're trying to do this in my business is that you're trying to make a prediction about the future. Now, Comic books have a long history of ending on cliffhangers. You almost never get to the end of the story at the end of the issue. There's always something new going on. And that's about a lot of how it is about making predictions in the business market. So I might have a prediction about what the company will earn next year. But as soon as I get to that point, I have to make the next prediction and the next prediction. And all this is done in an environment of incomplete information, which is similar again to comic books, and uncertainty. In reading the comic books, you can't be certain. You're only given part of the story. There's stuff happening other places. In the business analysis I do, I only ever get part of the story. I can never get every piece of information. So I have to be willing to make an analysis based on incomplete information. Now, all the skills I've just talked to you about for information management are, of course, necessary to be able to handle the massive amount of information that I have to deal with on a daily basis. But of course, they're not sufficient. You know, I did need to go to school, get education in economics and in accounting. I needed to take the CFA exam. I needed to learn from the different analysts that I work with. But in this brief talk so far, I've really only scratched the surface of acceptation. I could have spent the entire time I was here talking about reading about the different fights in the comic books, or watching Godzilla movies, Godzilla versus Mothra, Godzilla versus Mechaghedron, all these different ones, how I use those, how I've exapted those to make the competitive analysis I do of companies more robust by making it more multidimensional and more sensitive to the conditions that are currently present. I could have sat here and talked to you about how working at a movie theater as a projectionist and putting together the films every week helped teach me how to build mental cues for when I was going to expect some change to occur. There is, in my experience, once you start looking for skills to exact, there are myriad opportunities and potential. Now, if I had had to start 10 years ago and create all the skills that I now use on a day-to-day basis out of whole cloth, or if I had had to only rely on what I had been taught in school, quite frankly, I would have washed out of this business years ago. There would have been no way I could have managed the flow. But the ability to exact what I learned from comic books and from other things I engaged in my childhood, how I learned to process and retain information, how I learned to make the links between different stories became how I made the links between different companies. All these things have been fundamental to the skills I use in my day-to-day life. And why I was excited when Brad asked me if I could come out here and talk to you is that while the specifics of comic books or of movies or other things to me may be unique, I think the potential for acceptation is universal. And what is so exciting to me is that in this room and at AdTech, people are not just exacting themselves, but they are building engines of acceptation for others to use. And that's exciting to me because, again, the amount of information that we have to process, that we have to be able to deal with, not just in my job, but probably in a lot of your jobs, a lot of other people's jobs, is growing exponentially. And if everybody has to do it one-off, if everybody has to do it the way I did, which is exact from an analog source and on a one-to-one basis, then we're never going to get ahead of the information. But if there are people in this room building acceptation engines that other people can pick up that help them leverage skills they didn't know they had, that give them skills they didn't know they have, then maybe we can finally get ahead of that information. And that, to me, is pretty darn exciting. And that's about all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. For those of you who actually raise your hands if you were at AdTech New York. Anybody? Whole bunch of you. One of the things that we had there was Stephen Berlin Johnson, who was talking about his book, Where Good Ideas Come From. He is a devotee of Stephen Jay Gould, which is also two of the other people, in addition to Michael, who've been talking for quite some time. Stephen Jay Gould passed away, about acceptation. So this is a fascinating thing, and I think it's something we can be tilling here at AdTech. We are going to have a short break. We're going to start again, so it's a great time to get up, meet some people. Let's pull the house lights up so you could introduce yourselves. We're going to start. We have 2 more fantastic speakers at 4:20. So be back in your seats and ready to go at 4:20. And thank you so much for joining us.